Hello, everybody, and thank you for joining us today for this micro-focus webinar, Analytics Accelerate Securely into the Cloud. My name is Carol Murphy, and I'll be hosting today's event. I'm part of the Voltage Data Security Organization, responsible for global product marketing. I'm pleased to welcome our presenters for today, Sid Dutta from Voltage Product Management and Rich Gaston from our Market Development team. Before we begin, I'd like to encourage you to submit questions or comments during our event. To do so, just type your question or comment in the question box below the slides and submit. We have a Q&A session at the end of the event, and we'll answer as many questions as we're able to during that time. A reminder that you can maximize your screen by clicking the double arrow button in the lower right corner of the slides. And lastly, this webinar is being recorded and will be available to view on demand later today, along with a PDF copy of the slides. So now, let's get started. I'll hand it off to you to begin, Sid. Take it away.
Hey, thank you so much, Carol. And hey, hi to Rich as well, and hello, everyone. This is Sid. So we have actually a pretty exciting content today to showcase, and just quickly going over the agenda. So I'm not going to read through it. Obviously, this is for you to kind of just take a look at. So probably be covering a lot of these in quite detail. So there's a lot to cover. So let's get started. So I think when we talk about analytics and cloud and all these other stuff with security and so on and so forth. So obviously the point comes in question or context is data, right? And it's undeniable that as a culture, we have entered into an age of data. We're surrounded by stories of data breaches, data theft, data usage, data ownership. But while these phrases have become commonplace, many of us still carry misconceptions about these words. Now, what is data exactly, right? Is there a difference between data and information? At what point does data become knowledge? So starting with, what is data? And data is a recording of a fact, right? So there's something happened, like an event, that generated, some data with it. It might be a number, an image, an audio clip, a transcription, and among other things. It simply states that, something happened. You bought a bag of coffee, a plane entered the airport's airspace, the temperature of a nuclear reactor rose by 4 degrees. A post you left on social media recommending that grocery store to your friends. At this stage, they are raw and unprocessed. But as these bits of facts accumulate and grow, companies can use them to piece together assumptions about your behavior or the arrival time of the airplane or the safety of the nuclear reactor. Now, that process of analyzing and contextualizing these facts is what turns data into information. Now, data on its own has no meaning. It only takes on meaning and becomes information when it is interpreted. Data consists of raw facts and figures. So when that data is processed into sets according to context, it provides information. Now, when data is processed into information, it becomes interpretable and gains significance. And the final stage of data gathering is actually using that data to inform business decisions. In this process, we see the transformation of information into knowledge or insight. If information gave us localized context for that initial fact or event, business insight gives us a broader perspective on that event, allowing us to understand how the initial action might affect the behavior and decisions of the overall company. In other words, business insight puts the information into action. Now, the various stages of the data lifecycle is it's gathered and collected, it's cleansed, it's analyzed, it's reported, recommendations are made on that, actions are taken on those recommendations, and then eventually you see the results. Now, as I was talking about the data, the use of data, the age of data, today every company is a data company, right? And there's no two thoughts about it, right? And we are seeing this trend of data explosion. And what does that mean? Like, what does data explosion mean? How do you quantify this? So some of the interesting facts are like, It's 1.7 megabytes of data is created every second by every person during, this year, 2020. In the last 2 years alone, astonishingly high number, 90% of the world's data has been created just in the last 2 years. 2.5 quintillion bytes of data are produced by humans every day. Now, don't ask me how many zeros are there in quintillion. Every day, 306 billion emails are sent, 95 million photos and videos are shared every day on Instagram, 5 million tweets are made. So it's just, the explosion of data, right? And then they're saying by the end of this year, 2020, 44 zettabytes will make up the entire digital universe. And again, I don't know how many zeros in zettabytes. Meanwhile, there's obviously machine-generated data, will account for like 40% of the internet this year. And thankfully, we have data visualization tools to make all of these data understandable. And that's where I think the whole market of analytics comes into play. The other aspect is, IoT. It's not showing any sign of slowing down. In fact, the industry is booming. By 2023, there are expected to be around 1.3 billion IoT subscriptions. Last year itself, the number of active IoT devices was 26 billion. And in 2020, this year, 31 billion IoT devices will exist. Now, one of the other aspects of it is that up to 73% of company data goes unused for analytics. And the amount of data that companies are accumulating, not everything is being actually used for analytics and deriving those necessary business insights and information and knowledge for that. So that's one of the things that it needs to be understood, that not all data is actually contributing to the analytics aspect. Now, the second part is the monetization aspect of data, right? I mean, what does really monetization mean? I mean, it's kind of like a fancy way of saying making money from your data. Whether your organization is a data producer, data aggregator, or data consumer, you have the potential to generate new revenue streams through data monetization. Now, this value can be achieved across a broad spectrum of analytical activities, from descriptive through preemptive. Additionally, data can be leveraged across disparate disciplines, new data-driven products and services, client lifecycle management, internal cost optimization, sales funnel optimization, cross-sell, next best product, to name a few. So that's where we are right now. Now let's talk a little bit about some of the other trends in market observation. Yep, I don't think this is of any surprise to anyone. Rapid cloud adoption. The public cloud service market is expected to reach $623 billion by 2023 worldwide. And 83% of enterprise workloads will be in the cloud by 2020. 94% of enterprises already use the cloud service. And organizations almost leverage, like 5 different cloud platforms on an average. I mean, there was a recent study where in the multi-cloud aspect, that 93% of enterprises have a multi-cloud strategy and 87% have a hybrid cloud strategy. And interestingly, because of COVID-19, 59% of enterprises expect cloud usage to exceed prior plans. Now, basically, what are they consuming in the cloud? So the number one service in the cloud that's being consumed is the data warehouse as a service and database as a service. And you can see why, right? Because of the amount of data that companies are collecting, it's becoming increasingly hard for them to manage that humongous volume of data internally, within their IT infrastructure and within their data centers. The infrastructure that is required, and then the processing power that they need, the personnel that's required to manage that, it's just getting so hard. So cloud becomes a very obvious choice for them, kind of for the practical, infinite scale and the elasticity aspect, and then the pay-as-you-go model. So that's what is a big driver, for adoption of these cloud services, particularly in the data warehouse as a service, database as a service. Second place, of course, is adoption of platform as a service, which is a great capability for application deployment without worrying about the underlying infrastructure, so on and so forth. And not just enterprises only. I mean, there's the government, right? I mean, there's 50% of U.S. government organizations are now using the cloud, and that's where we are seeing a lot of push towards the cloud. And you have these cloud services providers offering these separate, dedicated government clouds, like the Gov Cloud, to handle government data. Moving forward, yep, this is again, as people are moving to the cloud, as there's a big influx of enterprise data and workloads into the cloud, we are also seeing an increasing amount of data breaches. Now, basically, what does that really mean, right? And cloud migration should not, be synonymous to being insecure or data to be compromised. But that's what the reality is. Poor security practices, complicated controls, and sometimes rushed technology programs are causing a rash of data breaches, stemming particularly from the use of cloud services. Now, there's a very interesting data point around what are some of the major causes of data breaches in the cloud. And interestingly, misconfiguration remains the #1 cause of data breaches. Sometimes it's lack of awareness of cloud security policies, lack of adequate controls, too many APIs, negligent insider behavior, and then, of course, the lack of awareness of the shared responsibility model when it comes to security. Those are contributing heavily to the data breaches that we are seeing. Now, hackers are going after servers that haven't been set up correctly, allowing them to view sensitive information and extract it with minimal effort. I mean, they're not really after your crypto, try to break that. I mean, they're just getting around it. I mean, when you expose, let's say, an S3 bucket to the internet, and there's not enough policies that have been implemented to prevent anyone to have that data, taken out very easily and then make it available on the internet, on the dark web. Then, regardless of how much server-side encryption and default encryption you turn on, I mean, it's just going to be of any value. So one of the biggest, recent data breaches that have happened, a flawed firewall implementation allowed the attacker to gain access to a server. In other cases, cloud servers themselves were incorrectly configured by the customers to allow anyone access to that data stored within. So in a lot of other cases, the encryption applied, were not really correctly applied, or they were like so transparent and native that when data comes out of it and whoever has access to it, the data comes out transparently decrypted. Now, defense in depth is great, but it just needs one miss across these various layers to open the door to any bad actor. And the level of control that enterprises have with cloud, as they move from on-premises to infrastructure as a service, to platform as a service, to functions as a service, to software as a service, those control starts to get taken away from them. So applying those traditional defense in-depth strategy with perimeter controls and access control, it no longer is keeping up, when it comes to security of data in the cloud, and in particularly in analytics space. All right, so I think this was a great quote from the head of cybersecurity practice for one of the global systems integrator, that our clients want to lock down their sensitive data, but still be able to unlock the value of that data at scale. This is, I think, a great quote for, particularly in this aspect. All right, so I think we'll move on to the customer challenges, and I'd like to hand it over to Rich. Rich, go ahead.
Oh, hey, thanks, Sid. Appreciate it. And hello to the audience. Wanted to kind of walk you through what we're seeing in the field and with our channel organization and direct into our large customer base for secure analytics. The pressures are really growing. And what I can tell you in terms of looking at this in the field, the regulatory pressures are growing horizontally, meaning you're covered by more regulations every year. You're subject to regulations from Canada, regulations from EU, regulations now from Brazil, and you're starting to see the cross coverage of regulatory schemes, each of which needs to be addressed. by a comprehensive plan across the organization. And analytics is a big area for this because of the sensitive data that's inside your analytics data stores. The second piece that I'm seeing in regulatory is a deepening of the capability of audit. The auditors are getting better. They're asking better questions. They're getting back with results that a protection scheme in your Teradata data warehouse that passed approval last year is no longer sufficient. And they want data protection at rest. They want stronger policies. They want insurance that there will be no unauthorized access to some of this sensitive data. The other piece that we're seeing is a regulatory creep on the type of data that's protected. We started with PCI data in the industry being the number one data that was most important in the organization, the credit card data. Regulated and fines and regulatory schemes have been in place for decades on that type of data. HIPAA data for medical as well, coming a little bit later. And now we're seeing a broadening out for the PII data types, the personally identifiable information. That's been name and address and email, the typical stuff that we all consider to be sensitive, including very sensitive tax ID as a number one data type to be protecting. But what I'll call out also is that our customers in various industries also come and tell us our data sensitivity goes beyond those data elements. We're looking at vehicle sensor data as being sensitive and can't be exposed. It needs strong policy and protection during analytics. We're seeing the vehicle identification number, the electronic identification number for a telco, the employee ID, the IP address, the geolocation data. You have to be able to address all these different data types now as part of your regulatory compliance program. So we're seeing an expansion of regulatory pressures that may come even also in terms of your contracts and legal restrictions. We've had a customer say, we've got a major telco as our customer. Now we're adding another one. Their contract states that their data must be protected with its own key and be available only to them in their use on their platform. And they can comply with that using SecureData because of how our product is designed. We're designed expressly for that kind of capability. So you're seeing restrictions that are going to come internally by contracts that your organization signed and not just from external entities like GDPR and your auditor. And lastly, we want to be able to make sure that we're seeing that we're able to enforce consistent policies during AI, artificial intelligence, and machine learning, ML kind of capabilities that are desired by organizations to say, I don't know what's in my data set. So to Sid's point, we've got an explosion of data. And now in the cloud, we can throw a tremendous amount of billions of transaction records into a machine learning platform. Let it go overnight for a couple of days, and then it's going to spit out some results that we didn't even know were in our data. It's mining for nuggets and correlations and patterns that we're not even searching for. And that's a very exciting area. But again, we must have consistent policy and protection before we expose sensitive data in the cloud. And we can do that with SecureData. Lastly, the offshore work may be subject to regulatory compliance requirements. We're seeing that grow as even look at Australia, saying that you can't have our Australian personal data outside the bounds of our country. So if I offshore work into India with an outsourcing agreement, how am I going to protect that sensitive data as people offshore are wanting to access it? And taking a look at the cost of this, we're seeing some real numbers add up. Facebook, a $5 billion fine. British Airways, a large fine under GDPR. And we're seeing this increasing now. We're seeing more news in CCPA, the California regs, where the pattern has been, we're going to pass the reg, we're going to tell you that the reg is coming in a couple years, then we're going to tell you the reg is here, and then we're going to tell you the fines that have been assigned against that regulation, and that's when you get the attention. So those are some of the trends we're seeing in the customer challenge on regulatory. Secondly, the operational overhead to manage big data. Our customers have hybrid approaches. We've got customers that are running on-prem Hadoop and cloud data warehouse. They're running on-prem data warehouse and cloud Hadoop. They're running all kinds of different services to run all kinds of different analytics, maybe for even different lines of business. So we're seeing this shift, but it may be granular, and you're tracking it across different use cases, and customers will take a very much a diverse approach to how they want to manage structured and unstructured data at scale. The cost benefit is clearly shifting toward cloud. If you take a look at a maintenance of a Teradata implementation on-premise, you still have a lot of customers investing and growing that. But Teradata can also take you to the cloud. Vertica can go into the cloud. Snowflake is cloud native and built for cloud. And so you have a number of services that are either native in the cloud or they're moving to cloud and offering their customers that shift. And the shift is typically toward a budget shift from capital expenditure of infrastructure into an operating expense towards subscription model and pay-as-you-go. Cloud-native solutions are really big out there in the field in terms of being able to take large amounts of data, store them, and then pay-as-you-go, and really battling it out in terms of best cost. The competition is fierce in that market, and customers are benefiting. And lastly, we just wanted to make a shout out to the cloud analytics platforms and enriching the customer's data. This is a very interesting area for us because we've got a customer, for example, in retail who is very much aware of the sales data because they run a bunch of retail operations, and they can see in arrears what was selling at a certain date and time. What they want to correlate is weather data because weather data affects their sales, and they want to predict their sales and pre-stock certain items, put other items on discount based on weather forecasts. If things are going to get extra cold, they need more tire chains. If things are extra warm, they're going to need different products in the stores. And they want to integrate that in the cloud with APIs that are either cheap or free, and they want to do it at scale because, as you can imagine, tracking weather data across a large geography, correlating that with my retail locations, and then making predictive analytics about what I need to do for stocking, that is some significant computational power required to do that. And then it all comes down to there's some exciting capabilities out there. The cost is really advantageous. But what about security? Am I allowed to put sensitive data in the cloud? Can I trust cloud the same way as I do on-prem? Typically, most organizations gut feeling no. So how do we come in and address that? And that's our challenge that we take on. So I'd like to turn this back over to Sid to talk a little bit more about value proposition and differentiators for our product.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Rich. So I'm not really going to go into too much of the detail, but there's some highlights that I want to just call out. So as Rich kind of mentioned about how customers are moving to the cloud and then some of those concerns and challenges that they have, where do we come in, right? And some of the key value propositions and market differentiators for us is one, is that we are a cloud-ready solution. Now, when it comes to being cloud-ready, you also have to be cloud agnostic and multi-cloud, support both hybrid and cloud implementation because a lot of customers are in their journey that it's not 100% cloud and they're migrating stuff very rapidly, but they're still operating in that hybrid model, and people are using different cloud services across any cloud service provider and kind of picking the best of the breed. So for us, being cloud agnostic and supporting hybrid and multi-cloud implementation is very key. So that's one of the value propositions. The other areas around the product itself being stateless and abstracting the key management and supporting a wide range of platforms and different ways to integrate, whether it's local or with the remote rest operations. So those are absolutely there and kind of core to our platform. But in the context of cloud and analytics, that's some of the things that we have done very well and differently than the competition or the rest of the industry playing in this particular space is the ubiquity and this wide array of support for any sort of services, in the life cycle of data, whether it's the ingestion space, where the data is being streamed, data is being done a transformation through any sort of ETL service or tools, when data actually is stored, whether it's on a object storage service or a Hadoop service like Elastic MapReduce, AWS service, or Cloudera, Hortonworks, any of the distribution, or Azure HD Insight or Dataproc from Google, and then this majority of these traditional data warehouse and databases platforms, like Vertica, Teradata. So we have kind of covered those, and when it comes to visualization, how do you allow users to seamlessly based on those policies that who's allowed to see data in the clear and who's not allowed to see the data in the clear, how we have made those integrations across those various visualization tools, applying the enterprise own policies for access. Then from a deployment perspective, a lot of customers choose to keep the solution on premises. They still have a barrier to move, key services and key management capabilities into the cloud. So we support that model as well, where on-premises deployments are serving, the crypto data protection capability in the cloud, where applications and data are in the cloud. Or if they choose to kind of deploy, those into their own, cloud VPCs or VNets, regardless of which cloud you are in, we have the capability to do that. And the other aspect about, and this is I'm going to be touching very, very lightly on, is just a snapshot of the different crypto capabilities. We are, have the patent for FF1 mode of AES, which is the format preserving encryption, and then we have enhanced on that to cater to a significant amount of use cases, whether it's for obvious protection, partial exposure, while it's protected, even for standard AES 256 for some of the use cases. A couple of differentiators that we have, and we are the only ones who do that, is one, a format preserving hash, for data anonymization use cases, where it's irreversible, but you still perform a irreversible operation like a hash, a cryptographic hash, and still retain the format and length of that data. Works great for these right to erasure, right to be forgotten use cases, and sometimes even for test data management, where you want to have production data to be obfuscated and with retaining all the test conditions and put it into a test development environment, but without having any capability for data to be reversed to its original form. And the other one is, of course, safe Unicode FPE. So that's one of our differentiators as well. Nobody really does this, where how we protect Unicode characters and still are able to, preserve the format. So that's on that. Quickly moving on to our capabilities, I'd like to hand it over to Rich back again to just take us through introduction to SecureData.
Hey, thanks, Sid. So in looking at the SecureData platform, we've had historic strength on the left-hand side in integrating our APIs into applications, integrating our APIs into mainframe, into databases, protecting files, ETL transactions, open systems, all kinds of different endpoints for our APIs. In analytics, we've really focused a huge amount of effort and had a gigantic market leadership in the area of Hadoop. And that has been one of the big winning use cases for SecureData in a lot of different organizations. So they'll be protecting the data as they capture it in a customer management system. And then that data, when they start doing transactions, will flow in a protected state into Hadoop. So Sid was showing you the format preserving encryption. We'll show you some examples of that. That data is protected at the moment it's captured, and it's protected in a format preserving way. So you don't have to change your schema. You don't have to worry about your character set or your length of your data, and it flows throughout the organization. So I can do analytics on it, and I can preserve that policy. The other thing that Sid hit on that I think is really crucially important for our platform and our capabilities is the fine-grained authorization you can get with SecureData. So I can say, and a lot of organizations have this need or plan for it, Sid can get access to the tax ID in the clear, and Rich cannot. And that is a key policy enforcement that needs to be able to be enforced across apps, Hadoop, ETL, open systems, cloud, etc. As we move into cloud, we started to add a lot of capability there. One of the areas that's most exciting for me is under the serverless functions area in cloud, as we're starting to now be able to provide those hooks and high power, high scale capabilities into cloud to power new use cases in analytics. And we'll show you some of those examples here of how that works today. In terms of the SecureData appliance and the infrastructure side, as Sid mentioned, you can run it on-prem or purely in the cloud, and we're really advancing and moving that forward to add a ton of new capabilities in our roadmap, and I'm really excited about what's coming down the pipeline as we continue to get more cloud native, more cloud capable, and more cloud scale. But you're always going to be able to want to connect back to your syslog feed for your audit. You're going to connect into HSMs, your hardware security modules. They're very important as a layer of defense in depth for our cryptographic master secrets and some of the crypto operations that we do with SecureData. We want to be able to connect into authentication sources, either in the cloud or on-prem, and SecureData has all those capabilities to do that. On the right-hand side, you'll see the big hitter use cases, I would say, in terms of where we excel in the market and what folks really value out of our platform. It's really the kinds of capabilities around the data that you can protect, the types of protection you can provide to that data, and then really under the hood, the stateless key management and performance are really driving our competitive advantage in analytics, because that's when we really start to see the need to decrypt 15 billion rows. When you're doing a customer management app and someone's doing a search and pulling up my record on screen, now I can decrypt that data. It takes me about 4 milliseconds. It's very quick and easy, right? But try to do that 15 billion times and tell me there's an SLA. We have to get this done within a certain amount of time, which is what our credit card processing customers do, and have very strict SLAs and fines that are associated with those. That's where we excel. That's where performance comes into play, and that's where we really take off. When Hadoop can start to generate 80 million transactions a second of format-preserving encryption, now all of a sudden we're starting to get into scale. You add more nodes, you add more scale. You go into the cloud and you can add that auto-scale capability that a batch of data shows up. We ramp up our capability, get charged by the penny, and then when that data is in and the batch is done, we go to sleep and stop costing the organization. So we're able to really take our performance and our cloud story forward and give customers what they want in terms of analytics in the cloud. I'll briefly touch on the protecting data at rest and in motion here in some examples tactically of some of the data types that our customers are protecting for analytics. And then you can see some of the partial encryption that can help maintain formatting or maintain analytics, and maybe you can do some work on the data without even decrypting it. But what we see out in the field is a need to decrypt and do it at scale. In cloud, we have dozens of use cases across many cloud providers, and we're adding more all the time. So I'm really excited about this area, but analytics is one of the big areas of use that our customers are asking for. They want to be able to decrypt that data only while it's in use. Keep it protected at rest, please. I have to have it protected at rest. Look at the Capital One breach that occurred. If they had just protected the data at rest, then that contractor who accessed that bucket and pulled that data and started the whole breach process, she would not have had access to anything but ciphertext. She still would have had another layer to break through if she really wanted to cause a breach in that scenario. We could have protected them had they used our product. That's what our customers are paying attention to, and that's what they want for secure analytics. They want to be able to enforce the policy across cloud use cases. That's a complex topic, and we're doing really amazing work out there in the field to be able to enforce those policies and say, AWS IAM, no problem. Azure AD, no problem. And we've got those kinds of authentication hooks to be able to make that work. This is a reference architecture. I just want to touch briefly on this. It shows a little bit of our capabilities. It's got a lot of bullet points on here, and you'll see the different kinds of use cases that customers are putting the data through, the entire life cycle. Let's capture it on-prem. Let's move it in the cloud. Let's ingest it, tag it, put some metadata around it. A forced policy on that in IAM with AWS. It's a major piece of the puzzle for AWS. And as Sid mentioned earlier, you'll see things like EMR, Elastic MapReduce. We have native capability for EMR integration in AWS. You can auto-scale. You can add more nodes. You can run Hive, Spark. You can run MapReduce, Impala, Scoop, StreamSets, NiFi, Kafka. It's amazing the number of different endpoints you can now implement in AWS natively with our product, where your developer is able to say, I'm going to protect this data here. I'm going to access it at scale here, and here are the people who get access to that data. That's what an auditor wants to see. Give me a list of who gets access to this, and I'm going to check it off against policy. That's what you're able to do with our data protection at scale in the cloud. I want to highlight one other analytics win and that we're bringing to market with cooperation with our partner in Snowflake. This will be hitting the market, and we are very excited. We've got this in POC now, and we're seeing very high performance in this use case. Snowflake is providing this common interface for data protection vendors so that we can fit in and provide for protection of data at rest. And then notice how on the right-hand side, you can come into Snowflake with Tableau, with Cognos, with MicroStrategy, with SAS, Power BI, with a JDBC connection. You can use the Snow tools, their own UI, and SnowSQL, SnowPipe. There are all kinds of tools and capabilities around the edge, and you don't have to do anything with the data protection lingo or syntax. It's all transparent to you. You say select star from customer where, and Snowflake takes care of the policy application, decryption, and presentation of that data. It's a very powerful solution that integrates our product under the hood, and it's going to be a very high-performance solution when we take that to market. So we're very excited about our work there. And stay tuned on that one. We're going to be having a lot of interesting work going forward with our partner in Snowflake. Let me take you back and to talk a little bit more about the business value that we see. And I've been out there in the field, and so Sid and I talk a lot about business value. What are the customers seeing? What are the partners seeing in terms of their journey with analytics and us? You have to satisfy two communities within this journey. On the one hand, you have like the data protection officer, the CIO, the CISO, the folks who really care that the data is protected at rest and in use, and that the policies are clear, and that audit can proceed, and we're going to get a clean audit, regardless of whether that's GDPR, PCI, HIPAA. A lot of different auditors crawling around. They got 10,000 folks at JP Morgan Chase now in risk and compliance. That's a lot of people, and they're asking a lot of really good questions for those lines of business. You can achieve security without impacting your analytics. We want to make encryption invisible to the average user or data scientist. You can expand the scope and power of analytics. You can add contractors, offshore users, even third parties, and do it with privacy. Sid was mentioning format preserving hash. We can even have an ability to then say, hey, here is a third party who can come in and see only hash data. That's a one-way protection. It cannot be reversed, but it maintains the format of the data. So we can pass multiple sets of data over to that partner. They can correlate it, analyze it, send it back, but we're doing it with privacy. If Facebook had done that with Cambridge Analytica, they would not have had a scandal. If they had simply run their partner program with more privacy, they would not have had the kind of exposure and fines and billions of dollars of costs that have incurred because of how they approached the lack of privacy in that regard in their partner program. We're very aware of it. We believe that we've got the right solutions there. You can add data types and data enrichment. You can use cloud AI and ML, the artificial intelligence, machine learning that we were talking about. Do it all with privacy. And lastly, the business value is to lift and shift workloads to the cloud. Achieve your cost savings through cloud migration. And I want to call out also format preserving encryption. If you take a look at a buddy of mine at a CTO at a company, it's a high-tech startup, they manage a lot of data and they have to encrypt it in the cloud, and they're using AES to do it. And we did an analysis there that showed that they could save $30,000 a month in storage costs alone by going with format preserving encryption, simply because we format preserve. We are shorter. Our string is shorter. And when you start to do billions of rows of data, it adds up. $30,000 a month is not cheap. So we're able to show a very significant cost savings just by doing a lift and shift into secure data, let alone shifting it to the cloud. And lastly, I just want to hit on some of the critical security requirements that we're hearing from our customer base and our partners. They want to have a global standard for protection of sensitive data, whether that's on-prem or multi-cloud. They want a global policy layer to say that Rich can get the data and Sid cannot. They want that integrated into IAM solutions globally. They want those global use cases with stateless key management, in cloud and on-prem, and they want to be able to integrate into cloud-native and third-party products at scale. Lastly, we can provide the support for audit and monitor the use of sensitive data. How much data is being decrypted? Who's doing that? Why are they doing it? What's happening with that data? Where's it going? We're starting to see more tracking and more live updates on our data. Lastly, I want to turn this back over to Sid, talk a little bit more about competitive advantage.
Thanks, Rich. Yeah, so I think There are a few things that I want to just call out. One, of course, voltage secure data is leading in cloud native analytics, and how we compare with our competitors, because there's a lot of limitations and capabilities and the models that they have kind of adopted, and the things that worked in the past, are no longer working in the cloud space, particularly. Some are still stuck with the gateway approach. There's also this notion of putting agents, at the endpoints. But as you move to the cloud and you see these serverless capabilities, I mean, there's no server that is being provisioned by the enterprises. So the concept of installing agents it just no longer applies. So that's one of the issues that we have found in the competition or other products that they're trying to address this ever-changing world of cloud and analytics by using the age-old traditional ways of protecting data. With the gateway approach is obviously, there's a significant scaling issues, performance issues. And then, of course, there's a lot of focus still on the data at rest, where server-side encryption, traditional transparent database encryption, these things, are still prevalent, but obviously they're not really doing much from a data-centric security perspective. There's this other aspect of what we call as non-data-centric protection technologies like dynamic data masking, where the data is never really stored, protected. It's only obfuscated when it's being viewed, through a visualization tool. So that's where the dynamic data masking things come. But obviously, when the data is stored, whether it's in cloud or on-prem, it's in the clear. And you're trying to kind of create this false perception of security, by implementing this data at rest type of encryption and stuff like that. Then, of course, there's other traditional vendors who are continuing on their HSM strategy, where particularly in the cloud use cases, where cloud providers have their own, HSM service, which are essentially rendering the keys, for you to use it for any sort of crypto purposes. That's what they're doing. Now, when it comes to the cloud services providers themselves, they are offering some sort of key management service, HSM service. And one of the things obviously they lack is the ability to create or offer, format preserving encryption or tokenization. The standard, for these KMSs and the SDKs that the cloud services providers are offering is use of AES GCM mode, AES 256 GCM. I think Google, with their DLP solution, has a capability of doing format preserving encryption, but that's only at the point when you are trying to, send a REST API request to identify or inspect data, whether it's sensitive or not. And then one of the ways to de-identify that data is format preserving encryption, and that's just Google something that they have done with their DLP product, but not with their KMS. The standard model of cloud services providers KMS, when it comes to real data-centric encryption, is what they call as envelope encryption. And envelope encryption essentially means you have a data, protect or encrypt it with a key, and then you encrypt the key with another key, and then you store that encrypted key and the encrypted data together. And when it comes to decryption of that data, you will have to go back to the KMS to decrypt that key in order to get the key in the clear so that you can decrypt that data. So there's, in terms of when it comes to, and Rich was talking about the performance and the scale requirements, when you have millions and billions of data points that you need to decrypt, for analytical purposes. Think about the overhead of going back to this centralized key management service or cloud HSM service to get your keys decrypted every time you have to decrypt the data. So obviously that doesn't scale. One of the fundamental issues with cloud services providers' own crypto capabilities are that they are confined within their own cloud services. And as we know that customers are using multiple clouds, and each one of them have their own keys. You can really port the data from one cloud to the other and expect those data to be decrypted seamlessly on the other side. There's going to be a bulk decryption operation that has to happen in order to port data. With obviously voltage stateless, you have the single enterprise solution that you can move data in a protected format from one cloud to the other, or on-prem to the cloud, or back, regardless of whatever combination you choose, you still have that ability to perform those decryption seamlessly, using the same set of keys that you used for encryption in the first place. And of course, in a lot of cases, cloud services provider is just offering these server-side encryption by default, and which kind of gives a little bit of a false perception of security that, yeah, sure, I have the data in the S3 bucket, and by default, AWS encrypts it. But again, it's all transparent, server-side. There's nothing data-centric about it. And we have talked at length, and we have a white paper that we called out every single capabilities that the cloud services providers offer. And please feel free to go through that. So with that, we have probably the last section of the presentation. Rich, over to you.
Yeah, a lot of folks will say, where do I go? How do I get going? And through Micro Focus, we have the skill sets and the professional services folks, the pre-sales folks that can help you identify the data requiring protection, identify your ideal platform. You want to really focus as an organization not on the technical selection as much as on the data. The data itself is very, very important for accelerating your journey. You're going to be able to put that data into a variety of platforms and operate on it with SecureData at will natively, whether you're choosing Hadoop, whether you're going with UDFs like Teradata, Vertica, Oracle, SQL Server, DB2, whether you're going to go with a cloud-native solution like Snowflake, you're going to be able to have SecureData on board. So what you as an organization need to take on is the responsibility for developing your authorization policy, who gets to see what, the data governance. That piece is very, very important to accelerate, because then you can take it into an implementation phase where you're doing your data protection and you're supplying your analytics at scale. That part will come after the fact, but you do need to work on your data governance first in order to accelerate. We're here to help you, and our channel partners, like our global systems integrators, they're definitely on board with this journey and can help you with every single step of the way, from governance to implementation, the technical side, the analytics. It's a really big landscape, and we've got all the right people in place to help you in that journey. So we hope you contact us and follow up, and if you have any interest in this topic at a greater level of detail, we'd love to talk to you more. With that, I'm going to throw it back for a little bit of Q&A, and Carol, I think you're on with us here.
Yes, Rich, thank you. Now, we will go through a Q&A, but before that, I just want to mention an excellent resource. It's the Tech Beacon Guide for Cloud Security and Data Privacy. You'll see the link for it showing up below your slides. Check that out. Grab that link and check it out for several really informative articles and an excellent white paper, which is written by Sid Dutta. Okay, so we have some great questions. I'd like to jump right in. And either of you, Sid or Rich, could answer this. You discussed how traditional vendors can't address integration with serverless cloud services. Can you explain why and how you're solving it? Maybe, Sid, you go first.
Yeah. Thanks, Carol. Yeah, so I think serverless has created a whole new paradigm in the cloud space, right? So we were so used to the concept of managing the infrastructure, be able to touch and feel it, and then essentially as we started to migrate from left to right, from infrastructure as a service to platform as a service, and now with function as a service, and then moving into more and more serverless compute, serverless databases, serverless ETL services. So the whole concept about serverless is that it's kind of a misnomer. I mean, of course, there is a server. The difference is that it's not provisioned for you, or you don't provision that server. The cloud providers essentially provision that for you, at runtime when you need to run a particular process or workload. So you have no control, of that system. So now going back to the point of then how do you really apply those traditional models of installing agents, installing clients, putting interceptors in the path or at the driver level, in order to, encrypt, decrypt, when you do not have any control of the infrastructure. So basically that has been some of the challenges that serverless has introduced, for traditional solutions that vendors have been using it. And now we've actually solved this, and this was one of our innovations that we did, where we kind of decoupled the whole infrastructure requirements in order to run a voltage obfuscation operation entirely transparently, entirely seamlessly, without having to install anything on a service, because even if we wanted to, we couldn't.
Okay. And Rich, did you want to add anything to that?
Excuse me. Well, as I look at it, Carol, across all these different SecureData use cases out there that customers implement, a lot of our servers, a lot of our APIs are sitting there running at a steady state. They run 24/7, 100% uptime, high availability, constant transactions coming in. But analytics is a different beast, and cloud is, in general, a different paradigm for some of the ways that we're using, and we're seeing lift and shift kind of capability and moving analytics to the cloud. And that requires a different scenario in terms of my infrastructure, and serverless gives me exactly what I've been looking for, which is we have a very lightweight API. It wants to wake up, it wants to fetch a key, do some data protection, and then go to sleep. Serverless gives me that exact scenario. And with analytics, it's so helpful because we can scale and auto-scale at peak demand. So at the end of the day, we know a gigantic file of transaction data is coming from a partner, something coming from a credit card bureau, my own transactions. We're going to feed it all into an analytics platform. We need that high scale. We might only need it for 30 minutes. We might need it for 3 hours. And serverless gives me that ability to ramp up very quickly, go to sleep, minimal charge. I think it gives us a huge advantage in the cloud, and specifically in analytics.
Great. Thank you. You mentioned, I'll take this one. You mentioned Google Cloud Platform offers format-preserving encryption. How does it compare to Voltage FPE, format-preserving encryption?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'll go. Yeah, so Google, obviously, they have their own KMS, Cloud HSM service, KMS being Key Management Service, that's traditionally being used for application level encryption, where envelope encryption, is followed. In those systems, obviously, the algorithm that's supported for doing application level encryption is AES-256 in GCM mode, right? It's not format preserving. However, Google has this other service, which is not really tied to application level encryption in bulk. It's actually called Google DLP. Now, Google DLP actually gives you three major APIs. One is an inspect API, where you can actually send or call the Google DLP inspect API and send the data for DLP to identify and classify a data, whether it's sensitive or not, whether it's a credit card number, it's a social security number, is it a name, so on and so forth. And then once you have identified, they also offer you two other APIs. One is called de-identify, and then the other one is, of course, re-identify in case you need to do any sort of reverse operation. So in the de-identify API, they're allowing you with the capability that in case you find something during the inspection of that data that was sensitive and you want to protect it, you can call that API to de-identify that data. And there are various ways that they're allowing you to de-identify, and it could be shifting, it could be redaction, and it could be format preserving encryption. So they are using FPE as one of the ways to de-identify. But again, it's in the context of DLP. Now, of course, how does it compare to Voltage FPE? And of course, as you're aware, that Voltage holds the patent for format preserving encryption, the FF1, and of course the NIST standards basically define how format preserving encryption needs to be laid out, or how it needs to be used, or what it means. But Voltage has done, several things on top of that, with capabilities like embedded format preserving encryption, like, format preserving hash, like, safe Unicode FPE. So there's, an array of features and capabilities. And most importantly, that this is in context of bulk massive high-performance use cases where you can do format-preserving encryption of data, particularly in the analytics use cases. Google DLP, being entirely a REST API endpoint, doesn't really have that scale, and it's not really meant for that sort of purposes. And the purpose is entirely on, hey, I got some data, I need to identify it and make sure if it's sensitive, I can allow it to get de-identified. And one of the ways to de-identify would be using format-preserving encryption. So it's not really apples to apples.
Excellent, excellent. Any further thoughts, Rich? Any feedback on that?
No, I think that was comprehensive. Thanks.
Yes, it was. Thank you. Very good. So I think what I'd like to ask now is this one. This is interesting. Confidential computing is a hot topic, also secure enclaves. How are you addressing these, either one of you?
Okay, I can take a stab at it, and Rich, you can follow up. Yeah, so I think this is a great advancement, in the world of security, and we are very excited about how things are going with it. Confidential computing or secure enclaves essentially allows the ability for you to get down to the point of when data actually is used and is in the clear, while it's being processed in memory. How do you even protect that, right? I mean, there's obviously data at rest, there's data in transit, and data in use is always something that, people have struggled with. And then, of course, with format preserving encryption, we do that a lot, where data doesn't need to be decrypted, but there are use cases where data will have to be decrypted. And in those cases, how do you really have something like a secure enclave, leveraging extensions of the processors like Intel SGX and of course AMD's own version of it. AWS just made their Nitro enclaves GA. Same with Azure and Google. So everyone is trying to kind of ensure that we close that gap of that exposure. And we are very excited because there are a lot of things that we would like to take advantage of, particularly with the value and the feature-rich capabilities of voltage. Confidential computing is just going to be another layer of hardening that security that we can establish that zero trust model. So definitely, stay tuned for more information and our advancements leveraging confidential computing. Rich, any comments from your side?
Thanks, Sid. I think I would add to that. I sort of look at it more from the real world today, what can we achieve perspective. And I would take an example of one of our major customers is internationally known credit card brand. And they have a very robust data privacy program that looks across transactions, creation and capture of customer data, analytics on that data, and they look at it as a percentage of completion in terms of data protection and privacy. And to them, the major goal for risk mitigation is to drive that percentage up, to say that I've got 80%, 90% of my data covered by voltage secure data, to be able to say that we've got protection across our web front ends, our mainframe back ends, all kinds of different ingress, egress points throughout the organization, and then to look at optimizing and going forward. And they're driving us in these conversations around Enclave. These are the folks that are actually looking out there from a cryptological perspective, from a deep security perspective, to say what's next, what's best, and keep going, keep pushing the envelope. What I take out to my partner community today is a very strong product that solves those real-world risk mitigation challenges to say, how can I get to 100% coverage? Now let's take a look at what Sid's going to deliver in the roadmap for how we can optimize that going forward. So I think it's a really nice strategy, and we have to keep our eye on that ball in terms of where we're going as an industry and how we can optimize security for the most sensitive data examples, where you're talking about national security examples, you're talking about some of the more highly sensitive intellectual property examples that may need additional protection. But when I look at tax ID, when I look at credit card number and PII data types and employee ID and vehicle identification number, I look at all the different data elements that our customers want to protect. We'll do that today, and we'll get you to that risk mitigation point today. And we're going to keep then down the road and how we can optimize for the future. So that's my kind of perspective on it as we look at that issue of enclaves.
Great. That's excellent. Well, we're coming up on the top of the hour, so that's really all the time we have today for questions. I want to thank our audience for your great participation. And if we weren't able to answer your question today, we will respond directly via email. Please note that a replay of today's event and a PDF copy of the slides will be available on demand shortly. And of course, we invite you to share them with your colleagues. And also, please take a moment to provide feedback in the feedback tab. Was this webcast helpful, valuable to you? What other topics would you like to hear? Again, thank you to our speakers. Thank you, Rich. Thank you, Sid. And thank you to our great audience today. This concludes our event. Have a great day.
Thank you.